My name is Naomi Reed. I'm 33 years old, and last month at my parents' 40th anniversary dinner, my 8-year-old son was told he didn't have a plate. The brass willow glowed in amber light and piano music, all crystal glasses and quiet money. I'd paid the $400 deposit myself, wanting one decent memory for Jonah. He tugged at his tie, smiling at the waiter. "Could I have the shrimp pasta, please?" he asked. Silence. My father's eyes stayed on his menu. My sister finally smirked. "We didn't order for him." My stomach turned to glass. Dad said, calm as ever, "You should have packed him something." The air snapped. I rose, heart pounding, but what they didn't know was I keep every receipt. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family, if you've ever sat at a table where love was supposed to live, but all you felt was cold glass and silence. Because what happened that night at the Brass Willow wasn't just dinner. It was the final entry in a ledger I'd been keeping my entire life. And I'm about to show you exactly how a lifetime of small cuts can turn into one clean break. I didn't start keeping receipts out of obsession. I started because, in my house, proof was the only kind of truth that mattered. The first one I remember was a crayon-stained flyer from my kindergarten art fair. I'd drawn a picture of my family, mom, dad, baby Sloane in her stroller, and me holding mom's hand. Only, when I handed it to her that night, she frowned slightly. "You made me too tall," she said, smoothing her skirt. "And honey, Sloane's hair isn't that dark." Then she smiled, soft and distracted, and pinned my drawing on the fridge. The next morning, it was gone, replaced by Sloane's finger painting. Mom said mine had fallen behind the fridge. I was 5. I believed her. At 6, I learned that love could be measured in leftovers. Sunday dinners were sacred in our house. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy thick enough to coat the spoon. Dad carved, Mom served, and Sloane, 3 years younger, always got the first piece, dark meat, her favorite. When the platter came to me, there was only a wing left. Mom smiled, handing me a dinner roll instead. "You like the bread more, right?" I nodded, chewing quietly while grease shimmered on Sloane's chin. I didn't know it then, but every "you like the bread" would become a thread in the rope that kept me tied to their approval. By 10, I had figured out the math of being the older child. Twice the chores, half the attention. Sloane cried once about folding laundry. Dad took over for her. Told me to be a good example. When I aced my spelling bee, no one came. They were busy at Sloane's dance recital. Mom said, "We can't split ourselves in two. Honey, your sister's event had tickets." The photo of Sloane in sequins hung in our hallway for years. My blue ribbon lived inside a shoebox under my bed. I used to think favoritism was a phase, like a cold you just wait out. But it turned out to be our family, religion, quietly practiced, never confessed. At 15, Sloane crashed Dad's Buick into a neighbor's mailbox. She cried until her mascara streaked down to her jawline. Dad sighed, wrote the check, and told her it was just a lesson. When I scraped a fender 2 years later, he made me pay half from my grocery store wages. Mom said it was good for me to learn responsibility. Responsibility, in our house, was code for atonement. The night I graduated high school, the living room was filled with camera flashes and laughter, but not for me. Sloane had announced her acceptance to a fashion program in Los Angeles. Mom opened a bottle of champagne, even though I was the one walking across the stage that night. When I walked into the room in my cap and gown, they actually shushed me. Sloane was on a call with her new roommate. I went upstairs and took a picture in the mirror. That photo, me smiling alone, eyes glassy, confetti from her celebration still stuck to my shoes, was the first image I ever saved for the record. Years later, when I started using spreadsheets to track my bills, it felt almost natural. I'd been tracking fairness my whole life, just without numbers. By the time I met Daniel, I thought I'd finally escaped that math. He was quiet, gentle in the way that loud men rarely are. We met at a friend's bonfire. He poured me coffee instead of beer and asked about my job at the marketing firm like it mattered. We married fast, too fast. Mom called it impulsive. Dad didn't bother to come to the courthouse. But when I told them I was pregnant a year later, they showed up at the baby shower smiling like none of it had happened. Another grandson. Dad boomed. Even though Jonah was the first. Sloane wasn't even there. She'd gone to Cabo with Travis. Mom blamed bad timing, and sent Jonah a silver spoon engraved with Sloane's initials apparently repurposed from her baby set. She laughed it off. "They're family. It's all the same blood." I smiled, pretending it didn't sting. But I wrapped the spoon in tissue paper and kept it. I keep everything. After Daniel left, the house fell quiet in a way that felt physical, like gravity had shifted. Jonah was 3. He didn't understand why Dad's toothbrush was gone, why I cried over bills. I picked up a second job coordinating events for a retail chain. Every invoice, every receipt went into labeled folders. The order made me feel safe. When Mom came by with a casserole, she tutted over the files spread across the table. "You've always been so organized," she said, in that tone that meant rigid. Sloane FaceTimed during that visit, showing off her new kitchen island. Mom turned the camera to me. "See, Naomi? If you'd let yourself have fun once in a while." I hung up before she could finish. That was the first time I ever cut a call short. It felt like sin and freedom in the same breath. But even then, I still kept showing up. Birthdays, holidays, every family night that Sloane scheduled at the last minute. I told myself Jonah needed grandparents. That kids remember the laughter more than the tension. I told myself maybe it was getting better. I told myself lies that sounded like love. One Christmas stands out. Jonah was 5. He'd made clay ornaments at school, painted one that said Grandma in shaky blue letters. He handed it to Mom after dinner. She smiled, thanked him, and hung it low on the tree. When Sloane arrived the next morning with store-bought gold ornaments spelling joy, Mom rearranged the branches, moving Jonah's gift to the back. That night, Jonah asked why Grandma didn't like his ornament. I said she just didn't want it to break. But when he went to bed, I dug it out and wrapped it in newspaper. It sits in my kitchen drawer, now another receipt of what love looked like in our house. At 30, I bought my first car on my own. Used, silver, reliable. The next week, Sloane called crying. Her lease had fallen through. Could I lend her $2,000 just until brand money cleared? Mom added pressure in her gentle way. "She's struggling, honey. You're doing so well now." Doing well meant useful. I transferred the money. The repayment never came. Another line in my ledger. I didn't know it then, but every unpaid debt, every skipped call, every missing plate was leading to that restaurant table. The night they finally said it out loud. When Jonah turned 6, I hosted his birthday at the community park. Nothing fancy, just cupcakes and a rented bounce house. I texted my parents the details a month ahead, even sent them a reminder the night before. They didn't show. Later, Mom said they'd assumed it was just for kids. Sloane posted photos of her brunch that same morning: mimosas, white plates, the caption, "Family First." I remember sitting on the curb after everyone left, folding up deflated balloons, while Jonah chased a bubble that popped before he could catch it. He didn't cry. He just said, "Maybe they'll come next time." And I said, "Maybe." There was always a next time. When Sloane needed help paying her down payment, I wired her $850 a month, telling myself it was temporary. When she called sobbing that her car battery had died, I sent another $300. When she thanked me, she called me a lifesaver. When she didn't, she said nothing. Mom once told me, "It's just money, Naomi. You can't take it with you." I wanted to tell her I didn't have much to take, but I bit my tongue. Like always, work became my refuge. Marketing wasn't glamorous, but it was predictable. Spreadsheets didn't play favorites. Numbers didn't forget birthdays. My boss, Priya, called me the human backup drive. She was half right. Every campaign I ran had a file tree, color-coded and precise. At home, I did the same with my bills: one binder for rent, one for school fees, one for Sloane's debts I'd probably never see again. Jonah joked that my binders looked like a rainbow. I told him order keeps chaos away. He nodded, as if he understood. Maybe he did. Mom called every few weeks, mostly updates about Sloane's latest influencer deal or Dad's golf tournaments. Once, she mentioned a new pastor at her church, said he reminded her of me. So responsible, maybe a little too serious. I smiled into the phone and said, "Guess it runs in the family." She didn't laugh. Then came Thanksgiving 2 years ago, the last holiday I still hosted for everyone. I cooked from scratch, set the table with real linens, even bought wine I couldn't afford. Mom arrived early, rearranged my table settings. "You've got the knives on the wrong side," she murmured. Sloane showed up an hour late, sweeping in like she was being filmed. Sorry, traffic, she said, dropping designer shopping bags by the door. Jonah offered her a paper turkey he'd made. She smiled without looking at it and asked if I had oat milk for her latte. Dad carved the turkey. When the wishbone snapped, he handed both pieces to Sloane. I remember thinking, even luck breaks her way. After they left, Jonah helped me scrape plates. He hummed quietly, and for a moment, the kitchen didn't feel so small. 1 week later, Mom called. Her voice had that brittle brightness I knew too well. Sweetheart, could you help Sloane with her taxes? She's overwhelmed. Mom, she's 30. I said, yes, but you've always been better with paperwork. I agreed out of habit, not kindness. When I opened Sloane's spreadsheet, I saw a dozen Venmo payments labeled Naomi Transfer and Emergency Loan. She hadn't even tried to rename them. That night, I added a new folder to my system, Family Financials. I didn't know why. Maybe instinct. Maybe survival. 2 months before the anniversary dinner, Mom called again, voice syrupy sweet. We're planning something special for our 40th. Sloane found a restaurant, the Brass Willow. I'd been there once for a client event. Expensive, classy, impossible to book on short notice. I hesitated, and Mom said, "You're the organized one. Could you handle the reservation?" Of course I did, because saying no in our family always sounded like betrayal. I used part of my tax refund for the deposit. That same night, Sloane texted me the menu. I'll send the pre-order list to the manager, so no one has to worry day of. I told her to include Jonah's favorite shrimp pasta. She heart-reacted and never replied. I should have followed up. I didn't. In the days leading up to the dinner, the tension in my chest tightened like a rubber band. Jonah practiced tying his clip-on tie in the hallway mirror. He looked proud, older somehow. I remember fixing his hair and whispering, "We're gonna make this night perfect. Okay?" He nodded, serious as a soldier. I wanted that night to rewrite everything that came before, every empty chair, every swallowed word. But memory doesn't erase that easily. It waits. And that night, waiting for us inside, the Brass Willow, was 33 years of quiet imbalance served on porcelain plates. I can still see the restaurant clearly, low amber lights. Piano in the corner, the smell of butter and aged steak. My heels clicked against marble as the hostess let us in. Jonah's small hand was steady in mine. When I saw my family at the round table, something in me fluttered. Hope, stupid and familiar. Mom's pearls gleamed. Sloane's dress shimmered like money. 2 gift boxes sat in the center of the table, both wrapped in blue ribbon, both labeled for Sloane's kids. Nothing for Jonah. I told myself not to care. I told myself we were past that. I told myself 100 lies before I even sat down. When Mom hugged me, she smelled like lavender and distance. "Oh, Naomi," she said, smiling just wide enough for the camera that wasn't there. Dad nodded, already watching the waiter. Sloane looked up from her phone just long enough to say, "Hey, sis." It was choreography. I knew the steps. Jonah handed Mom 2 handmade cards he'd drawn, happy anniversary, Grandma and Grandpa. She smiled, slid them into her purse without opening them. "That's nice, sweetheart." I felt his small fingers curl tighter around mine under the table. And that's when I knew something was about to break, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet finality of glass cooling after fire. I didn't know it back then, but that night would split my life clean in two, before and after. Before, I kept peace. After, I kept evidence. The morning after the dinner, my phone buzzed before sunrise. A new email from Dad's account. The subject line read simply, "Invoice." Inside was a scanned receipt from the Brass Willow, $1,127.94, followed by his note. "Since you canceled mid-meal, the restaurant charged extra for disruption. We expect you to reimburse. It's about respect." Respect. That word rattled in my skull like a coin dropped in a metal jar. I'd paid the deposit. I'd planned the event. Still, I opened my banking app and stared at my balance. Then I did what I always did. I opened a new tab in my spreadsheet, labeled it Damage Control. That afternoon, Priya noticed me zoning out at my desk. "Everything okay?" she asked, sipping her coffee. "Family math," I said. "The kind that never balances." She gave me that look, half sympathy, half warning. "Set a boundary before it sets you on fire," she said. I smiled, because it sounded like something people with normal families could do. By evening, Sloan had posted an Instagram story. A blurry photo of wine glasses and the caption, "Some people don't understand loyalty. But karma keeps receipts too." Mom commented with a heart emoji. I didn't reply. I just screenshotted it another entry from my folder. For the next week, silence. Then a text from Mom. "Your father's disappointed. Maybe apologize, honey. You overreacted." Overreacted. The word I'd been hearing since I was old enough to cry. I typed and erased a dozen responses, finally sending just one line. "I'm done apologizing for being disrespected." She left it on read. The next storm came quietly. A call from Jonah's school. "Miss Reed, could you come in this afternoon?" The principal's voice sounded cautious, like he was stepping onto thin ice. When I arrived, a woman from CPS was already there, slim folder. Calm tone, eyes trained to spot guilt. "Someone reported concerns about Jonah's well-being," she said. Her voice was kind, professional, practiced. "Possible neglect, inadequate food, being left unsupervised." I felt my pulse climb behind my ribs. "That's insane," I said softly. But she was already flipping through her clipboard. "I understand this is stressful. We're required by law to investigate all claims." The inspection happened the next morning. Jonah ate breakfast while Miss Hernandez opened cupboards, noted expiration dates, glanced through the pantry like a judge taking inventory of love. My fridge was full. My bills were paid. My son was smiling and fed. When she finished, she looked up and nodded. "I'll be closing this case as unsubstantiated. I suspect retaliation." The word hung in the air, retaliation. For the first time, I saw my family not as flawed people, but as calculated ones. After she left, Jonah asked, "Did I do something bad?" I knelt in front of him. "No, sweetheart. Grown-ups just lie sometimes when they're scared." He nodded like he understood too much for eight. That night, I didn't cry. I made copies. Every document she'd given me, every timestamp. I added them to a new binder. CPS, October. Avery, my lawyer friend from a past campaign, called back within minutes after I emailed her. "You're right to document everything," she said. "People escalate when their control slips." Escalate how? Smear, stalk, sue. Sometimes all three. The next blow came at the grocery store, under fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. Jonah and I were halfway down the baking aisle when I heard her. Sloane's voice bright, sharp, public. "Well, if it isn't the family destroyer," she said loud enough for strangers to hear. Jonah froze. "We're just shopping," I said. "Not the place, Sloane." She laughed, brittle as dry ice. "There's no right place to talk when you're tearing the family apart over dinner." Her perfume hit me before her words did something expensive and suffocating. "Mom's heartbroken. Dad's humiliated. And you? Still playing the victim?" A store clerk looked up. Two shoppers paused. I felt the heat rise in my throat. I could have shouted. I could have explained. Instead, I said quietly, "Excuse us," and pushed the cart past her. Jonah's hand slid into mine. He whispered, "You did good, Mom." I smiled, but my chest ached. We turned the corner into the next aisle, and I realized people had filmed it. I could feel the phones. When we got home, I wrote it all down: time, date, witnesses, store. Then I checked the security site online. Verde Market records footage for 14 days. I filled out a formal request that night. For once, I wasn't just enduring. I was preparing. The next morning, another text from Mom. "You've embarrassed your sister in public now. She's devastated. Please fix this before it ruins us." Ruins us. I stared at the message until it blurred. Then I set my phone down beside the binder labeled evidence. 2 days later, a white envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, just my name typed neatly across the front. Inside was a printed photo. Me and Jonah in the grocery aisle, my hand on the cart, his face turned away. Someone had circled me in red marker. Below, in handwriting I knew too well, were the words, "Family should stick together. Stop making us look bad." My stomach dropped. I ran my thumb along the edge of the paper, feeling the tacky residue of the marker. It wasn't just a message. It was a warning. That night, I scanned it, dated it, and slipped it into the binder under Verde Market incident. By the time Jonah went to bed, I'd already labeled a new folder on my computer, retaliation evidence. The next morning, Priya leaned on my cubicle wall. You look like you didn't sleep. Because I didn't, I said. She studied me, then nodded toward my screen. Start writing everything down. Every call, every text, every accident. It's not paranoia. It's pattern recognition. I almost laughed. You sound like my therapist. She smiled. Then maybe you should start listening to both of us. That weekend, Delilah came over with her husband, Morton. She carried a casserole, and the kind of anger that simmers low but steady. They crossed the line, she said the moment I opened the door. How'd you know? I asked. She raised an eyebrow. Your mother called me. Said you're spiraling. I actually laughed, sharp and humorless. Spiraling? Lila nodded. That's what they say when they lose control of their scapegoat. Morton patted Jonah's head gently, like a quiet oath. We've got your back, kiddo. While Jonah watched cartoons, I told them everything, CPS, the grocery store, the photo. Lila listened, lips pressed tight. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document, yellow with age. Found this cleaning out the attic, she said. Recognize it? At the top, in fading typewriter ink, temporary child care authorization, 1,997. My name filled the line under child. Marion's signature at the bottom. I was supposed to take you for 6 months, Lila said softly. Your mom said she couldn't connect. She paused, looking away. Your father made her tear it up the next day. He said it would look bad. My throat closed. Why didn't you tell me? I thought you knew. Maybe I didn't want to reopen something she never closed. I took the paper carefully, as if it might disintegrate in my hands. The past suddenly had weight again, sharp edges pressing through decades of denial. I scanned it that night, naming the file evidence. 1. Origin. Monday morning. Another blow. My paycheck was late. Finance said my direct deposit had been rerouted after a change request. Only, I hadn't filed one. I spent half the day unraveling it. Someone had used my work email as reference. Spoofed perfectly. Avery confirmed it. That's harassment through impersonation. Keep the IT ticket logs. She was calm, methodical. This is classic escalation financial pressure when emotional guilt fails. That evening, Travis texted me out of nowhere. Naomi, I'm sorry for all of it. I didn't know she'd call CPS. Check your Venmo in 5 minutes. I frowned. 5 minutes later, the notification blinked. $3,600 received from Travis Hart, repayment. I'm sorry. My pulse spiked. It covered nearly half the rent I'd paid for Sloan. Another message followed. Be careful. They're planning something else. I didn't reply. Instead, I screenshot everything. Saved it twice. Printed it once. Later, Avery called. Document the repayment. It proves acknowledgement of debt. Then her tone shifted. Naomi, brace yourself. I got a notice this afternoon. My stomach nodded. What notice? Your parents filed for grandparent visitation rights. Through a Scottsdale firm, expensive. Aggressive. I sat on the edge of my bed. They barely visit. That's why it won't hold, she said. Arizona law favors the parent unless the grandparents were primary caretakers. But it's not about winning. It's about intimidation. I stared at the wall, at the photos Jonah had drawn of rockets and stars. So, what do we do? Avery's voice steadied me. We fight with proof. And Naomi, don't contact them directly again. Let the evidence speak. The next morning, Jonah found me at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. He blinked sleepily. Are we in trouble? No, baby, I said, sliding the CPS report into its sleeve. We're just making sure no one lies about us ever again. He nodded solemnly, then went to feed the cat. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was building a case, a fortress made of facts. That evening, the sky over Phoenix turned bruised purple, thunder in the distance. I poured myself coffee, opened a new document, and typed the title in bold. The Collins Ledger. Every lie has a receipt. As I scrolled through folders, Venmo logs, CPS findings, the 1,997 authorization form, I caught my reflection in the dark laptop screen. Calm, focused, unshakable. The kind of woman my parents would never recognize. The kind they'd underestimated for too long. The petition arrived on a Wednesday morning, thick paper sealed with gold lettering from Brenner and Tate, one of Scottsdale's most expensive family law firms. I stood at the mailbox, sunlight burning the edges of the envelope. Jonah's backpack straps brushed my leg. Can I open it? He asked. Not this one, sweetheart. My voice came out thinner than air. Inside, the words screamed even without sound. Petition for grandparent visitation rights. Gerald and Marion Collins. The document described me as emotionally unstable, vindictive, and withholding a grandchild's love. I felt something in my chest here, clean and deep. For a moment, I thought about driving straight to their house, pounding on the door, demanding why. But instead, I took a photo of every page, named the file, and sent it to Avery. Her reply came within the hour. Don't panic. We can end this. That night, thunder rolled through the valley. Jonah was asleep, but I sat in the kitchen, binder open, light flickering over the pages like a confession. The next morning, I met Avery at her office glass walls, whiteboard covered in timelines. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered strategy. They're painting you as unstable, she said, tapping her pen. So we fight with consistency. She opened a folder, the CPS closure report, Travis's repayment, the 1,997 authorization, the photo from the grocery store, the text threats. This, she said, isn't a family feud. It's a harassment case disguised as love. Then she looked at me. Naomi, are you ready for this to get ugly? I thought of Jonah's face that night at the restaurant. It already is. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a call from the Brass Willows general manager. We've had an attorney request records from your family's event, he said cautiously. I need those records too, I replied. Anything with a menu list, payment breakdown, staff statements. He hesitated. One of our piano players might have something interesting. He mentioned recording that night for rehearsal purposes. My heartbeat stuttered. Can I get a copy? He exhaled. I'll see what I can do. 3 days passed. Then, an email arrived with a single attachment. Audio, the Brass Willow, Sept. I plugged in my headphones. Static. Silverware clinking. Soft jazz. Then voices. Sloane's laughter sharp, brittle. We didn't order for him. She can feed her own kid. Dad's low grunt. She should have packed him something. She always expects us to fix her messes. Mom's murmur. Please, Jerry. Then my own voice. Steady but cold. Cancel my order. Bill it to my father. Chairs scraping. Gasps. The moment that broke us. I listened 3 times. By the third, my hands had stopped shaking. I sent the file to Avery with the subject line, Proof of Neglect plus Bias Audio Evidence. That weekend, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Lila called from her kitchen, the hum of her old fridge behind her voice. Naomi, you need to hear this. Marion slipped up at church. Said she never thought that little CPS call would go that far. Patricia overheard. I sank into a chair. She called CPS? Who else would have known your address? Jonah's school? Your schedule? Connect the dots. The air went thin. For years, my mother had built her identity around gentleness. But now, the mask had cracks and behind it, there was calculation. Avery's reaction was pure lawyer efficiency. We'll use it, she said. It shows intent to harm. She drafted a letter overnight, citing harassment, defamation, false reporting, and emotional distress. The next morning, she sent copies to Brenner and Tate. 2 days later, their lawyer called Avery privately. He's advising them to drop the petition, she told me. He's seen your documentation, the audio, the CPS statement, the 1,997 authorization, the Venmo logs. It's too much exposure. If this goes public, your parents' reputation at the golf club, the church, everything, they'll lose it all. I stared at the phone, silent. So it's over? For now, she said. But we make it official. You'll send your own letter, 5 sentences. No emotion, pure boundary. That night, I wrote it by hand first, so I could feel every word. I have documented every instance of neglect, manipulation, and cruelty toward myself and my son. These records are in possession of my attorney and trusted parties. Any attempt to contact us will result in police involvement and full public disclosure. This is not a negotiation. It is permanent. I printed 3 copies, signed them, and sealed each in an envelope. Then I sat in silence, the kind that hums right before a storm breaks. The next morning, the FedEx driver arrived. I handed him the envelopes like weapons. As the truck pulled away, Jonah looked up from his cereal. Are you sending work stuff again? Kind of, I said. Something important. He shrugged, spoon clinking the bowl. You look lighter, Mom. I smiled. Maybe I am. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. Naomi? It's Travis. I almost hung up, but something in his voice, quiet, stripped of charm, stopped me. They're falling apart, he said. Sloane's furious about the letter. Jerry's threatening to cut her off. Marion's blaming everyone. Why are you telling me this? Because, he said, you're the only one who ever told the truth. Then, he hesitated. I hope you win. Before I could answer, he hung up. That night, rain hammered against the windows. I opened my laptop, played the restaurant recording one last time. The sound no longer made me shake. It made me certain. I scrolled through my folders, the ledger that started as pain and ended as power. Every file was a piece of armor. Every receipt, a wound that finally healed itself. When I turned off the laptop, the house was dark except for Jonah's nightlight glowing through his door. He was safe. He was fed. He was loved. And for the first time in my life, I felt something that wasn't fear or guilt. It was victory, quiet, earned, irreversible. Outside, thunder cracked again. But this time, I didn't flinch. The day after the petition was dropped, the house felt too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't ache, just hums with relief. I poured coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and looked at the binders stacked like sentinels. They weren't just records anymore. They were the story of how I stopped begging to be believed. Still, I wasn't naive. People like my parents don't surrender. They retreat, wait, and whisper. So I made sure every piece of truth was backed up 3 times: hard drive, cloud, safety deposit box. Avery had copies. So did Lila. If they ever tried again, it would all come out: the audio, the 1,997 authorization, the CPS retaliation, even the photo Sloane mailed me with the red circle. Lila called that evening. They're keeping quiet for now, she said, but the church is buzzing. Let them buzz, I said. Truth echoes louder. She laughed, low and proud. You sound like your own woman, finally. I think I am. That night, Jonah and I redecorated the hallway wall. We took down every framed photo that had once defined family, the staged Christmas cards, the forced smiles, the people who'd never really seen us. The shredder whirred softly as the past turned to paper dust. In their place, we hung new pictures. Jonah holding his science fair ribbon. Lila and Morton grilling in our backyard. Priya and me, laughing over coffee. A collage of people who showed up. At the center, I pinned a single page, one of Jonah's drawings. 2 stick figures standing under a blue sky. He'd labeled them, me and Mom. Safe. That word hit harder than any apology could. When the mail arrived the next morning, there was one last envelope, no return address. Marion's handwriting on the front. For a second, my old instinct kicked in. Open it. Explain it. Fix it. Instead, I slid it into the shredder without breaking the seal. Some messages don't deserve to be read. Later, I took Jonah to the park. The desert air was cool, the sky pinking over the horizon. He ran ahead, laughing, hair catching the light. I watched him and realized this was what freedom looked like: not distance from pain, but the absence of its control. They thought they'd buried me in shame and silence. But all they'd really done was hand me every weapon I'd ever need. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, the one who had to earn what should have been freely given, hit subscribe. Because stories like mine don't end with silence. They end with boundaries and peace that nobody can take back. Drop a comment if you've ever had to rebuild your version of family from the ground up. And remember, blood isn't what makes you family, respect does. This story isn't over. It's just the first chapter of what happens when the black sheep learns how to fight back.